Rain hammered against the old wooden house as Aaron sat alone by the dim light of a cracked lamp. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows like the claws of some restless beast. He had grown used to the silence of this place, used to the emptiness that waited in every room. Nights passed without voices. Days passed without footsteps. It was a quiet life, and sometimes he wondered if he had become part of the house itself, just another forgotten thing covered in dust. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost lost beneath the storm. He froze, unsure if he had imagined it. Another knock came, louder this time, sharp enough to cut through the sound of the rain. No one ever came here. No one even knew this house was still occupied. He rose slowly, his boots scraping the wooden floor, and moved to the door. When he opened it, the cold wind rushed inside like a living thing. A figure stood on the porch. She was small, thin, and shivering. Her clothes were torn and soaked through, clinging to her fragile frame. Her skin had a faint silver tone that shimmered in the lightning flashes. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the dim porch light like polished glass. "I only need food," she said softly, her voice trembling like cracked glass. "Or a little work. Anything." Aaron stared at her. She was clearly not human, though she stood like one. He had seen her kind before in passing on the trade docks. Quiet and distant, never staying long, always looking as if they were ready to run. He had never seen one up close, never spoken to one. "You should not be here," he said. "I know," she whispered, lowering her head. "I will go if you wish." Something inside him shifted. She looked like she could collapse any moment. Her lips were pale, her eyes unfocused from hunger or cold. The porch light flickered against her soaked hair as the rain lashed her back like whips. "Wait," he said at last. Her head lifted slowly. "I have a house that needs cleaning," Aaron said. "You can earn a few credits if you want. Just for tonight." She gave the smallest nod, almost afraid the offer would vanish if she moved too quickly. Aaron stepped aside and let her in. The warmth hit her like a wave. She stepped carefully over the threshold, leaving muddy footprints on the floorboards. Her gaze moved around the room, scanning every corner like a cornered animal. He could see her shoulders trembling under the thin fabric of her clothes. "You can start in the main room," Aaron said, trying to keep his voice steady. She nodded again, silent. He gave her an old rag and a small bucket of water, then stood back and watched as she began to work. Her hands were delicate yet steady, moving with a kind of desperate focus. She wiped dust from forgotten shelves and swept cobwebs from the corners. Every motion seemed like it cost her strength she did not have, yet she kept going without a word. Hours passed quietly. The storm raged outside while inside the house slowly began to breathe again. The walls that had sat in darkness for years now glimmered under the faint glow of the lamp. Aaron stayed in the doorway, arms folded, unsure why he could not look away. There was something haunting about the way she moved. Something broken, yet unyielding. Then she stumbled. The rag slipped from her fingers as her knees hit the wooden floor. She caught herself on one hand, swaying like a dying flame. "Stop," Aaron said, stepping forward. She shook her head weakly. "I can finish." "You will finish nothing if you collapse," he said firmly. She blinked up at him with those pale, glowing eyes. Then her body gave in. She slumped sideways, silent. Aaron caught her before she hit the ground. She was light as air in his arms, weightless from hunger and exhaustion. He could feel the faint tremor of her heartbeat against his chest as he carried her to the couch. He covered her with an old blanket, unsure why he even had it still. She curled into it without waking, her breathing shallow but steady. Aaron stood over her for a long time. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling away into the hills. The house, once cold and hollow, now held a single fragile heartbeat. He did not know who she was. He did not know what she had endured to reach his door, but for the first time in years he was not alone. Soft morning light crept through the cracked curtains and spilled across the room. Aaron sat at the edge of his chair, half awake, half watching the strange figure asleep on his couch. The storm had passed, leaving only the smell of wet earth drifting through the open window. Outside, birds had returned to the trees. Inside, the house was still silent except for the faint sound of her breathing. She had not moved all night. Aaron rose quietly and stepped closer. Her silver-toned skin looked warmer now in the morning light, less like polished metal and more like living flesh. Strands of pale hair framed her face in tangled waves. She seemed younger when she slept, almost childlike. Yet there was something in the way her fingers curled tight around the blanket, like someone who feared it might be taken away. Aaron poured water from the old kettle and set it on the small table near her. The steam curled through the air like thin ghosts. He wondered if she would wake hungry. He wondered if she had eaten anything at all before coming to his door. She stirred then, eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze darted across the room like a wild creature searching for danger. "It's all right," Aaron said gently. "You're safe here." Her eyes stopped on him, cautious but not afraid. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and sat up slowly. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My house," Aaron replied. "You collapsed while cleaning. I thought it was better to let you rest." Her gaze lowered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trouble you." "You're not trouble," he said. "What's your name?" "Lyra." The name carried a soft musical tone, light and fragile, like the whisper of wind through glass. "Aaron," he said, tapping his chest. She gave a small nod. Her eyes searched the room as if trying to understand where she was. The old walls, the worn furniture, the dust that still clung to corners, none of it seemed familiar or safe to her. "Do you want something to eat?" Aaron asked. She hesitated, then nodded again. He moved to the kitchen and returned with a simple plate of bread, dried fruit, and a mug of warm broth. She accepted it with trembling hands. The first bite seemed to bring life back into her face. Her shoulders eased. A faint sound escaped her lips, a soft sigh that might have been gratitude. Aaron sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. "Where do you come from?" Lyra's chewing slowed. For a moment she said nothing. Then she placed the bread down carefully as if speaking might shatter it. "Nowhere," she said. "Not anymore." He waited, but she did not explain further. Her eyes carried something hollow, something that spoke of long roads and endless nights. He could see she was not ready to tell her story, and he did not press her. "You don't have to clean today," Aaron said. "Just rest." Lyra shook her head gently. "If I rest, I owe you. If I work, I can pay you." Aaron frowned, but saw the stubborn glint in her eyes. "Then something small," he said at last. "No heavy work." She rose, still unsteady, and began folding the blanket she had used. Her movements were quiet and careful, as if she feared breaking the silence. She cleaned the small table, swept the floor again, and straightened the old shelves. Aaron followed her with his eyes, uneasy, yet curious. There was no sound of complaint from her, no sign of pride either. She worked with the quiet desperation of someone clinging to the last thread of dignity. As the hours passed, the house began to feel different, warmer, brighter. Not because it was clean, but because someone was moving through it. For the first time in years, Aaron heard soft footsteps echo through his halls. At midday, Lyra paused to catch her breath. Aaron offered her more food. She accepted without words, sitting cross-legged on the floor. When she looked up at him, a small spark of color had returned to her cheeks. "Thank you," she murmured. "You don't need to thank me," Aaron said. "Just stay until you are stronger." Lyra's eyes flickered with surprise, then with something unreadable. "Stay? Just for a while," he said. "Until you decide where to go." Her gaze fell to her hands. She said nothing, but her shoulders lowered and the tension in her frame eased. Later, as the sun dipped low, Aaron found himself standing by the window, looking out at the forest. Lyra had curled up again on the couch, this time awake, quietly watching the fading light. He wondered how long she had been wandering, how many doors had closed in her face before she reached his. The wind rose outside, stirring the trees into whispers. Aaron looked back at her and saw her watching him now. Their eyes met, and for the first time she smiled. It was small and fleeting, like a star blinking through the clouds, but it caught him off guard. The house had been silent for so long. Now it felt like it was listening. Aaron turned away quickly, unsure why his chest felt tight. He told himself she was only here to rest, only a guest. But when he glanced back, she was still smiling softly, as if she had caught his thought and forgiven it. Morning sunlight spilled across the wooden floor like a slow river of gold. Aaron woke to the sound of quiet movement in the kitchen. For a moment, he thought it was a memory from years ago, the sound of someone else living here, someone who belonged. But when he rose and stepped into the doorway, it was Lyra he saw. She was standing by the counter, carefully arranging pieces of fruit on a plate. Her hands still trembled, but less than before. The silver tone of her skin caught the light, turning soft and warm instead of cold. She did not hear him at first. She hummed a strange tune, low and broken, like she was trying to remember a song from another world. Aaron leaned on the doorway. "You're up early." Lyra jumped slightly, then straightened. "I wanted to prepare something for you," she said. "You let me stay. I should give something back." He glanced at the plate. The fruit was sliced unevenly, and the bread was half burnt, but the effort was clear. "Looks good," he said with a faint smile. She lowered her eyes, hiding her own small smile. They sat at the table together. She ate carefully, still unsure if she was allowed to enjoy it. Aaron watched her from the corner of his eye. Something had changed. The haunted look was fading from her gaze, replaced by quiet focus. She looked less like a wandering shadow and more like a living person. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. It was warm. Her voice caught slightly on the word, like she had not said it in a long time. When the meal was done, Lyra rose and began clearing the table without being asked. Aaron stood too, trying to stop her, but she shook her head. "Let me work. It keeps my mind still." He let her. For the next hours, she moved through the rooms, sweeping, dusting, and scrubbing. There was grace in her motions now, something delicate yet steady. The house, which had lived in silence for years, now echoed with the soft rhythm of her footsteps. Aaron followed her with small tasks of his own, fixing old shelves and oiling door hinges. Every now and then their paths crossed in a hallway or doorway. She would pause, give him a quiet nod, and pass by with the faintest curve of a smile. At noon, he brought her a bowl of soup. She accepted it with quiet gratitude and sat on the porch. The forest stretched beyond them in endless waves of green. Sunlight fell through the branches, casting dappled shadows on the old porch boards. "I have not stayed anywhere this long," she said suddenly. Aaron looked at her. "How long has it been?" "Since I had a place?" She thought for a moment. "Years, maybe more. Time is strange when you do not belong anywhere." He wanted to ask what had happened to her, why she had been alone, but stopped. The softness in her voice warned him away. "You could stay," he said quietly. "At least for a while." Lyra turned her head toward him. The sunlight caught her eyes, making them glow faintly. "Would that be allowed?" "This is my house," Aaron said. "I decide what's allowed." For the first time, her smile lingered. It was small, but it stayed. That afternoon, they worked together in the garden. The air was cool and smelled of wet soil. Lyra's hair caught in the breeze as she bent to pull weeds. She laughed once when a stubborn root refused to come free, and the sound startled Aaron. It had been years since laughter had lived in this place. As the sun began to set, they carried tools back inside. The house glowed warm in the fading light, and the scent of fresh earth clung to their clothes. Later, Aaron sat by the fire while Lyra folded the blanket she had used on the couch. She placed it on the shelf, then stood there uncertainly, as if waiting for instructions. "You don't have to keep sleeping on the couch," Aaron said. "There's a spare room down the hall." She hesitated. "If I stay in a real room, I might forget this is temporary. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad," he said. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and disappeared down the hallway, carrying the blanket. Aaron stayed by the fire long after she was gone. The crackle of the flames filled the empty spaces where silence used to live. Something had shifted in the house. Something had shifted in him. When he finally rose and passed the hallway, he paused outside the room where she now slept. A faint light shone under the door. He could hear her breathing, slow and steady. He told himself she was only here to clean, only a guest. But when he walked away, his chest felt strangely lighter, as if he had been holding his breath for years and only now remembered how to breathe. Rain began again that evening, soft and steady against the roof. The forest outside melted into shadows while the house glowed with the quiet warmth of the fire. Aaron sat at the old table, working through a stack of old repair notes. though his eyes drifted off into the hallway where Lyra had gone. She had been quieter all day. Not sad, not distant, just wrapped in some invisible thought she did not speak aloud. She worked as usual, cleaning the shelves and tending the garden tools. But her eyes stayed on the floor, her voice locked behind silence. Aaron had not pressed her. Some wounds were not meant to be opened by force. Now the house lay still, the only sound the clock's slow ticking and the whisper of rain. Aaron pushed back his chair and rose. He was tired and ready to sleep. He moved down the hallway, each step sinking softly into the old wood. As he neared his room, he reached for the door, thinking only of rest. Then he stopped. The door was slightly open, and the faint light of the small lamp spilled out. He pushed it wider. Lyra lay on the edge of his bed. She was curled small under the blanket, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. Her pale hair fanned across the pillow like threads of moonlight. She was asleep so deeply that she did not stir when the door moved. Aaron froze in the doorway. He had given her the spare room. Why had she come here? For a moment he thought of waking her, telling her gently to move, but something stopped him. Her face was soft now, free of the guarded expression she wore while awake. There was no fear there, no hardness, only quiet. She looked like someone who had finally stopped running. His chest tightened. He stepped quietly inside, his boots silent on the old rug. The sound of her breathing filled the room in slow, steady waves. He knelt slightly, brushing the edge of the blanket back over her shoulder. Her skin glimmered faintly in the lamplight. Then she whispered his name. It was soft, almost broken, breathed like a dream. Aaron went still. She did not wake. He stood there a long moment, the rain whispering against the window behind him. Finally, he stepped back. He pulled the spare blanket from the chest at the foot of the bed and spread it on the floor. He lay, down there without a word, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain and her quiet breathing. Sleep did not come easily. His mind moved in endless circles. He told himself it meant nothing, that she was only lost and seeking warmth. He told himself she would be gone soon, that this was only a small passing moment in both their lives. But each time he closed his eyes, he saw her sleeping face again, peaceful and trusting, curled on his bed like a creature who had finally found safety. At some point, the storm outside grew louder. The wind pushed at the walls. Rain lashed the windows. Lyra shifted slightly on the bed, murmuring something he could not understand. He turned his head and watched her, ready to wake if she stirred in fear. But she only sank deeper into the blanket, her breathing calm. Aaron finally let his eyes close. When he woke, the storm had passed. Pale light crept through the curtains, washing the room in silver. His back ached from the hard floor, but he stayed still for a while, listening. Lyra still slept, curled in the same small shape, like she feared she might vanish if she stretched too far. He rose quietly, pulling the blanket from his shoulders. He stood by the window, looking out at the glistening world. The forest dripped with rain, leaves shining like wet glass. Behind him, Lyra stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. They met his, blinking with confusion, then with embarrassment. She pushed herself up quickly, clutching the blanket. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to take your bed." Aaron turned. "It's fine. I was cold," she said, her voice small. And the room felt empty. He nodded. "I understand." She hesitated, watching him as if expecting anger. But there was none, only a quiet weariness in his face and something gentler beneath it. "Next time," Aaron said, "just ask." Lyra lowered her gaze. "There will not be a next time." Aaron did not answer. She rose from the bed, folding the blanket with careful hands. She stood there for a long moment, as if she wanted to explain, then carried the blanket back to the spare room without another word. When she was gone, the room felt colder again. The walls seemed to echo with silence. Aaron stood alone by the window, watching the morning settle over the forest. He told himself it meant nothing, that she had only been cold, that it would not happen again. But as he touched the edge of the bed where she had slept, the warmth still lingered in the sheets, and for the first time in years, the bed no longer felt like his alone. The house carried a strange stillness that morning, not cold or hollow, but quiet in a way Aaron could feel inside his chest. He sat at the table drinking dark tea while the sound of soft footsteps approached. Lyra stepped into the room, head slightly bowed, clutching the folded blanket from the night before. She placed it on the shelf without looking at him. Her movements were slow and careful, as if each gesture carried hidden weight. Aaron set down his cup. "You don't need to apologize." Lyra froze, then turned her eyes toward him. They held a fragile mixture of shame and defiance. "I took your bed. I should not have done that." "You were tired," Aaron said gently, "and cold. I would rather you stay warm than follow rules." Her lips parted like she might argue, but no words came. She stood silent, shoulders drawn tight. Aaron rose and walked to the window. Sunlight pushed through the clouds, striking the forest in broken shafts. The air smelled of rain and new growth. He spoke without looking back. "You don't have to keep proving you deserve to be here." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "If I do not prove it, you might send me away." Aaron turned then. "I'm not going to send you away." Something broke in her eyes like thin glass cracking. She lowered her gaze and stood very still, as if unsure what to do with this kind of mercy. "Stay," Aaron said simply. "Stay until you want to leave." Lyra's throat moved as she swallowed, but she gave no answer. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and began preparing bread with slow, shaky hands. They moved through the day together like shadows slowly learning to hold shape. She cleaned the windows while he repaired the loose roof boards. She hummed softly when she thought he was too far to hear. The sound was thin but alive, threading through the empty corners of the house. By afternoon, the rooms looked brighter, not just from sunlight but from the quiet rhythm of their shared work. When evening came, Aaron brought out the old cooking pot. Lyra watched curiously as he added vegetables and herbs. The smell of simmering broth spread through the house like a warm blanket. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair. She obeyed, still wary but no longer distant. They ate slowly by the fire while the night rose outside. The flames painted shifting colors across her silver-toned skin. She seemed softer here, less like someone on the edge of vanishing. After a long silence, Lyra spoke. "I have not sat like this since I was a child." Aaron lifted his eyes. "Like what?" "Sharing food," she said, without fear. Her words settled between them like fragile glass. Aaron wanted to ask what she had feared, what had chased her all this way, but he stopped. He had learned that some stories could not be taken. They had to be offered. Instead, he said, "You can do it again, every night if you want." Lyra blinked at him, startled. Then a quiet laugh escaped her, so soft it sounded like the crackle of the fire. Later, after the dishes were cleaned, Aaron found her standing by the window, staring into the dark forest. Her shoulders looked smaller in the dim light, like the weight of the world had pressed her down. "You are safe here," he said from behind her. She turned her head slightly. "Safe does not last." "Maybe not," Aaron said. "But while it does, you can rest." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, caught between longing and disbelief. Then she nodded once and left the window. That night she did not go to the spare room. She stopped in the hallway outside his door, her hands twisting in the folds of her shirt. Aaron saw her there when he stepped from the washroom. "Can I stay near you?" she asked quietly. "Just until I sleep?" His chest tightened. "Yes." She climbed into the bed and curled on one edge, leaving space between them. Aaron lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, the firelight fading against the walls. Minutes passed in soft silence. Her breathing slowed. Then she whispered, "I will find a way to repay you." "You don't have to," Aaron replied. "I want to." Her voice faded into sleep. Aaron stayed awake long after. The bed that had once held only cold now held warmth. The house that had once been silent now carried 2 steady breaths. He closed his eyes and let the rhythm carry him. For the first time in years, he did not dream of empty rooms. He dreamed of laughter echoing through them, and someone waiting at the table when morning came. The days that followed were quiet, almost peaceful. Morning light spilled across the wooden floors while the smell of warm bread drifted from the kitchen. Aaron and Lyra moved around each other like the pieces of an old puzzle slowly finding where they belonged. She spoke more now. Sometimes she asked small questions about the tools he used or the plants he grew in the garden. Sometimes she laughed softly at his clumsy jokes, and each time she did, the house seemed to breathe deeper, but beneath the warmth, something unseen still clung to her. Aaron noticed it in her eyes when she stood by the window too long, staring at the tree line. He saw it in the way she froze whenever a distant engine passed on the road. There was fear there, buried deep, waiting like a shadow that refused to fade. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Aaron returned from chopping firewood to find her standing outside the house, unmoving. She was staring toward the forest. "Lyra," he called gently. "Are you all right?" She turned quickly, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. I was only listening to the wind, but Aaron had heard it too. Not the wind, but the faint hum of a distant craft fading into the hills. That night, the unease followed her into their quiet dinner. She barely touched her food. Her eyes kept drifting to the window as if expecting someone to appear. When the fire burned low, Aaron set his cup aside. "Who are you running from?" Lyra froze. The question cut through the silence like a blade. "I am not," she began, but stopped. Her hands tightened around the mug. Aaron waited, saying nothing. Finally she whispered, "They called it a labor camp, but it was a cage." The words came slowly, heavy and cold. "They took people from the lower colonies," she said. "Said we owed debt. Said we could work it off. But no one ever left. Not alive." Aaron felt the air drain from the room. "I escaped," she said. "I ran during a storm when the power failed. I hid in the cargo bays of freight ships. I kept moving until no one knew my name." She lifted her eyes to his. They were sharp with fear and sorrow. "If they find me, they will take me back. And anyone who helps me will suffer too." The fire crackled between them. Aaron spoke carefully. "You are safe here," Lyra shook her head. "Nowhere is safe. Not forever. Maybe not forever," he said. "But tonight you are." Her breath trembled as if she might break. Then she rose and walked into the shadows of the hallway, leaving her untouched plate behind. Aaron sat alone by the dying fire, staring into the flames until they were only glowing coals. The next day passed in tense quiet. Lyra worked silently, her movements sharp and fast like she needed to outrun her thoughts. Aaron stayed close, pretending to mend old shelves while his eyes never strayed far from her. By afternoon, a strange unease grew in the air. Birds fled the trees beyond the house. The forest went still. Then Aaron heard the sound, faint but real. The low hum of an engine, closer this time. He stepped to the porch. A small black skimmer hovered down the dirt road, silent as a shadow. Two figures sat inside, helmets glinting in the sun. Aaron's chest tightened. Behind him, Lyra's breath hitched. "They found me," she whispered. The skimmer slowed near the edge of the clearing. The figures scanned the house with cold precision. Aaron turned to her. "Go out the back," Lyra shook her head. "They will find me. Not if I hide you." For a heartbeat, she stood frozen. Then she ran. Aaron grabbed the old storage hatch beneath the floorboards. Dust rose as he threw it open. Lyra climbed down quickly, vanishing into the dark space. He lowered the hatch and kicked the rug back over it just as the knock came at the door. Aaron opened it slowly. Two armored men stood there, visors blank. "Have you seen a female from the Delta colonies?" one asked. Silver-toned skin, thin build, escaped convict, dangerous. Aaron kept his voice flat. "No one's come here." They scanned the room behind him. The taller one stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the threshold. Aaron met his gaze without blinking. "You can look around, but you will not find what is not here." After a tense pause, the man stepped back. They left without another word, the skimmer rising into the air like a silent ghost. Aaron waited until the sound faded before he locked the door and pulled back the rug. Lyra crawled out, shaking her breath ragged. "They will come again," she said. "Then we will not be here," Aaron replied, her eyes widened. "You would leave your home?" "For me?" Aaron held her gaze. "I will not let them take you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The house stood silent around them, filled with the echo of what had almost happened. Then Lyra stepped forward and pressed her forehead lightly against his chest. He felt her trembling against him, the fear still there but softened by something new. Trust. They left the house before dawn. The forest lay silent, wrapped in cold mist as Aaron guided the old ground vehicle along forgotten trails. Lyra sat beside him, wrapped in a thick coat he had found in the attic, her silver-toned skin hidden from the eyes of any patrol. She stared out the window without speaking, her breath fogging the glass. Behind them, the small house faded into the trees like it had never existed. For hours they drove deeper into the mountains, where no patrols roamed and no trade ships passed. The roads grew thin and wild, twisting between walls of dark pine. The world narrowed to the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of their breathing. At midday, Aaron stopped beside an old wooden bridge that crossed a black river. He stepped out, checking the fuel cells in the map, while Lyra walked slowly to the water's edge. She crouched there, dipping her fingers into the cold current. The sunlight caught her skin, turning her hands into flashes of silver beneath the rippling surface. Aaron watched her quietly. For the first time since he had met her, she looked unguarded. Not free yet, but lighter, like the chains in her mind were loosening. When she rose, her gaze met his. "Where are we going?" "A place no one remembers," he said. "An old cabin in the mountains. No one will find us there." "Us," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Yes," Aaron said. She gave a small nod, then climbed back into the vehicle. By nightfall, the trees opened to a narrow valley and the cabin came into view. It was small and ancient, its roof sagging, its porch half broken, but smoke still curled from the old chimney when Aaron tested the flue. They stepped inside. Dust danced in the air like faded memories. Lyra ran her fingers across the wooden walls, eyes wide. "This place feels quiet," she said. "Quiet is good," Aaron replied. They worked together through the evening, patching leaks and sweeping dust from the floors. Aaron lit the fire while Lyra arranged old blankets near the hearth. The crackle of flames filled the cabin with a soft golden glow, painting warmth onto the cold wooden bones. Later, they ate by the fire, dried meat, warm broth, and the last of the fruit from Aaron's pack. Lyra sat cross-legged on the rug, her hair glinting like pale threads in the flickering light. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer heavy or cold. It felt like a blanket stretched gently between two hearts. "You did not have to do this," Lyra said at last. Aaron looked at her. "I know. You left your home," she whispered. "For me? I left an empty house," Aaron said. This is different." Lyra lowered her gaze, her voice almost breaking. "No one has ever chosen me before." Aaron moved closer, resting his hand lightly on hers. "I choose you." She did not pull away. The fire burned low as night deepened. Wind pressed against the windows, but the cabin held steady. Lyra lay on the bedroll near the fire, watching the flames fade. Aaron sat beside her, shoulders resting against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. She shifted then, turning toward him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Aaron," she said, "if they come again, you could still leave me. It would be safer." "I am done living safe," he said simply. Her lips curved into the softest smile, small but real. She moved closer, her head resting gently against his chest. Aaron felt the warmth of her breath through his shirt, steady and calm. For a long time they sat like that, listening to the quiet world outside. Eventually, Lyra whispered, "I am not afraid when you are here." Aaron wrapped the blanket around them both. "Then I will stay here." Her eyes closed, her breathing slowing. The tension that had wrapped her like iron was gone. She lay curled against him, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from trust. Aaron lay down beside her as the fire sank to glowing embers. The bed that had once been empty now carried the soft weight of someone who had found peace. The cabin walls no longer echoed with silence. They held two steady heartbeats beating in time. Outside, the night wrapped the mountains in deep stillness. Inside, warmth spread through the little cabin, soft and unspoken like the first hint of spring after a long winter. Aaron closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he did not dream of being alone.